So today is the 31st of December 2021, the last day of the year. So today, and this is also an audio check. Today what we're going to do is we're going to continue from where we left off yesterday and finish off the Fourth Crusade, the crazy crusades of the Roman Catholic Church. The Fourth Crusade takes the cake. So yesterday what we did was, last episode, we heard about the reason for the crusade, the background, and today we're going to hear about two battles: the Battle of Zara and the battle for Constantinople. Bearing in mind that this is the Fourth Crusade, we need to understand that the Crusades were initially sparked as was sparked by the Muslim conquests into the Byzantine Empire. In other words, it was a Christian versus Muslim series of events. Except for the Fourth Crusade. That turned out to be Christian versus Christian. It's the Roman Empire versus the Hungarian, the Kingdom of Hungary, or whatever, Kingdom of Hungary, I think they call it. And then the Roman Empire versus the Byzantine Empire. Unbelievably ridiculous stuff. And let's get into it from where we left off yesterday. Today, we will cover first the attack on Zara, as I said before. Then the siege of Constantinople. Like I didn't say before, I said battle. And then there's the legacy of the Fourth Crusade. Just remember that it's Christian against Christian all the way. All right. The Fourth Crusade podcast is brought to you courtesy of A Real Crusades History. And here we go.
Welcome to the Real Crusades History Podcast. Today, our topic is going to be the Fourth Crusade. This is episode 2 in our new Fourth Crusade podcast series. And we have quite a substantial panel today to discuss this topic. My name is J. Stephen Roberts. I'll be your host. I'd also like to welcome Rand Brown. Rand, how you doing?
Pretty good.
And Rand and I are welcoming Dr. Helena Schroeder back with us again. Dr. Schroeder, how are you?
Great, glad to be here.
And Paul Copenhagen, who hasn't been with us since the Kingdom of Heaven podcast series you were here with us when we did the Albigensian Crusade series too. But Paul Copenhagen, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be back in the saddle.
Great. And also we've got Joe Vicinanzo, who is with us for the last episode of the Fourth Crusade podcast. Joe, welcome.
Thanks for having me back.
All right, so we're just going to jump right into this topic here. So when last we left off, we had the upper command of the Fourth Crusade having been essentially established in France. They have now commissioned representatives to speak with Venice and arrange things in Venice. And the original plan was to assemble the Crusaders in Venice and launch an attack on Egypt in the summer of 1202. However, there were quite a few problems with this plan and with actually assembling everyone. By autumn, many of the Crusaders still had not arrived. The full numbers that had been anticipated had not arrived yet. Some individuals, frustrated with these delays, had actually departed on their own and already traveled on to Palestine, which really kind of threw a monkey wrench into everything, considering the fact that this was going to be an expedition to Egypt. And others decided not to depart from Venice altogether and instead launched from, quote, other ports, as Geoffrey de Villehardouin scathingly described them in his chronicle. So, Dr. Schroeder, I just would like to start with you today. What do you think of this plan to attack Egypt directly from Europe with 33,500 men? Was this reasonable?
So there's nothing inherently wrong with the plan as such to attack Egypt directly from Europe. We saw that Richard the Lionheart took his entire fleet from England around, staging along the way, but he basically built his fleet in England and took it all the way. And he intended to attack Egypt. It was as partly his plan to attack Egypt. We see later crusades also choose to go towards Egypt. And the staging at Cyprus, it's a useful place to assemble, etc. But you still have to get to Cyprus by ship. Venice had no trouble with fielding ships across the entire Eastern Mediterranean. They did it for hundreds of years to come. So there's nothing inherently wrong with the plan as such of going by ship to attack Egypt. The problem is in the leadership, because you talked about, as you say, that there's this young people we talked about. They were very young. We're talking about Richard the Lionheart's nephews. We're talking about someone who's 22 years old, I think, in the case of was he the Count de Blois? These are not kings. Richard spent a year loading on extra taxes to increase the revenues that he already had from a kingdom, an entire kingdom, not to mention his Angevin continental empire. The Holy Roman Emperor had the resources of an entire empire at his disposal. Philip of France is despite having less territory than Richard, is still a very, very wealthy monarch. They could put together a fleet. A couple of counts could not. They didn't have the resources. One. Two, they were depending on people coming because they'd sworn to come along. This is a bunch of buddies saying, let's go on crusade. I'm sorry, I'm making it sound a little bit facetious, but this is very different from the Holy Roman Emperor telling his vassals that I expect you to show up at some place. And no, the Crusaders obviously were always volunteers. They were never something that the kings forced. But a king calling for a crusade has a lot more authority, even if it's only moral authority, than some young nobleman. So that the real flaw is not in the concept of taking crusaders by ship to the Holy Land. As I say, it's been done before and it will be done later. The problem is in the resources, both financial and military, of the actual leaders of this crusade.
Yeah, very well put. Does anybody have any further comments on that topic? Or
I have a question for anyone if they know anything more about this. Venice had some pretty close trading ties with Egypt, with the Muslims down there in Cairo, and in fact, they had made a trade deal in 2001 with the people of Cairo.
1201.
1201. Yes. Does anyone have any more information, perhaps, or any thoughts on whether or not Venice was actually intending to bring the Crusaders all the way to Egypt in the first place?
That's a very interesting point, one that I wasn't even aware of.
Well, I know Jonathan Phillips addressed that in his book, and because that's something that Stephen Runciman says, is that he claimed that Venice actually had made an agreement prior with Alexandria that they would divert the crusade away from them. But Jonathan Phillips says there's no evidence for that. So
I personally don't think there's any reason to think so either. That sounds again like a bit conspiracy theories and
Right.
trying to make the Venetians totally Machiavellian here. They had strong trading ties with Alexandria because trading with Egypt is an extremely profitable business. They're carrying trade out of for the riches coming out of the Nile is a very, very lucrative one, and it's one anybody would cover. The Venetians, therefore, would even be happier to have that without having it completely under their own control.
Exactly.
in 1201, they have to deal with the Muslims because they control Egypt. If they could get control of of Alexandria and the Nile Basin, they don't have to deal with those guys. They don't have to give them a cut. It's much more lucrative for Venice.
Oh, that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah, that's the point Jonathan Phillips actually made. He said owning Egypt, owning Alexandria is considerably more profitable than having to trade with Alexandria. So
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. Okay, so by autumn of 1202, only about a third of the projected 33,500 men had actually assembled in Venice. So this brings us to the point where ultimately the French end up owing the Venetians about 34,000 silver marks for shipping that had already been prepared. And as we discussed in the last episode, Venice had essentially diverted their entire commercial activity toward creating this fleet for the Crusaders. So I think, Joe, you sort of mentioned last time, this was something that really had to be repaid to Venice if Venice was to continue to exist. The Doge of Venice at this point, Enrico Dandolo, suggested that the debt be settled through plunder. The Doge asked the Crusaders to aid Venice in recapturing the port city of Zara on the Dalmatian coast from the Hungarians. So this isn't even an Eastern Orthodox city. This is a fellow Catholic, Latin city. And indeed, I believe Zara had made some commitments already to the Crusade, or the King of Hungary had made some commitments to it. So Rand, I'm going to go to you. What do you think of this proposal? Was this a violation of the ideal of the Crusades?
Well, I think there's a couple different ways to answer that. First and foremost, I think objectively, yes, it was. And that was made very clear by a certain party within the Crusader leadership, with especially the Abbot of Vaux, the papal legate, and figures like Simon de Montfort and others that, they were not okay with this. However, what's really interesting about the Doge's proposal to take Zara.
What's that? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Sydney.
Yeah?
Sydney Winston.
Yeah?
Sydney Wise. Sydney Winston. Sydney Wise. Sydney. All gods are imaginary. Sydney Winston.
Yeah, baby.
Is that it almost seems like not all the Crusaders, even in Venice, were even aware that that's what was being planned. If you reread Geoffrey Villehardouin's account, he kind of almost makes it sound like the Doge, he makes this very public show of joining the crusade and taking the cross.
Yeah.
And then,
So yeah, I'm told that it must be louder. So here it goes. Bill Pesdu, thank you. Let's see if we can make it louder.
Sydney. Sydney Winston.
How's that?
Sydney Wise. Sydney Winston. Sydney Wise. Sydney Winston. All gods are imaginary.
Yeah!
Sydney Winston.
it's almost like
Indeed.
in the midst of that, he gets together with a select few of the Crusader leaders and says, "Well, hey, look, we've decided this. Since you owe us, over 30,000 marks, how about we real quick before we go to Egypt? How about you guys hop across the Adriatic and take back the city that we lost. I've read other pieces by some other Crusades historians that mention that in like the account by Robert Denary, the Crusaders were almost a lot of the Crusaders, especially the lower ranking guys, almost seemed surprised when they showed up at Zara. Like they almost like many of them didn't even know why they were even there at first. And then all of a sudden they're being told, "Oh, we need to take the city for Venice in order to get to Egypt." And when you reread Geoffrey Villehardouin's account, when he talks about the resistance that starts to come from people like the Abbot of Vaux and the de Montforts, you get that impression that like not everybody was being told about this before they were there. And it's an interesting detail that I think kind of gets overlooked a lot of times, that I think the Doge was only working kind of with certain people within the crusading leadership when he proposed this.
Boniface of Montferrat and the inner circle.
And that the others, once everybody gets on the same page, that's really where you start to see the rift amongst the various leaders, and you see some people just straight up defect from the Crusades, from the Crusade.
Can I say something here?
You bet.
I know other people haven't. I know other people haven't had a chance yet. I just think that we've got to keep separate Crusade and the attack on Zara. Because the attack on Zara is not a crusade. Nobody's pretending the attack on Zara is a crusade. This is a way of financing a crusade.
Right.
And where the people divide, and also let's not make too much of we're attacking another Latin city, because this is not a crusade. This is a frontal attack. This is a pure for-profit operation. And Philip was attacking Richard's territories, and Richard was taking out French cities at the same time.
Right. It was commonplace for Latins to be at war with each other.
Have been at war with each other. They besieged each other's cities. They plunder them. They run rampant in them. If you're at war, there was constant war between Latin kingdoms at this period, and that's all we're doing here. We're not going on crusade. We're not calling this a crusade. We are financing, hopefully, a future crusade by taking this city. Yeah. And therefore, it's wrong to confuse it. I think I said in our little private talk, Jay, that I think that the biggest problem with the Fourth Crusade is that it's a numbered crusade at all. The crusade ended in Venice when they couldn't afford the ships. From then on, this army is nothing but a mercenary. There's nothing but a mercenary army from then on, and Villehardouin's entire passion about it is trying to keep the army together in the hope that eventually, if we keep it together, we will be able to later go on crusade. But neither Zara nor Constantinople is a crusade.
I would agree. I would agree with that, except to the point where there were obviously many in the crusading army at that time who still saw themselves as a crusade. The portion that I want to read from Geoffrey's account is the quote by the Abbot of Vaux, the Cistercian papal legate, who at the council, at one of the councils at Zara, he says, quote, "My lords, on behalf of the Roman Pope, I forbid you to lay siege to this city, for it is a Christian city and you are pilgrims," unquote. When the Doge heard this, he was greatly angered and annoyed. He said to the counts and barons, quote, "My lords, the city was ready to submit to me, and your men have taken it from me. You made an agreement with me to help me capture it, and now I call on you to do so," unquote. So there were obviously people within this army who saw themselves as crusaders.
Yes, quite obviously. Well, another tribute to Bill Pazdu. Pazdu, the salutes for you. Oh, Happy New Year, everybody, especially to you, Bill. Happy, prosperous, and healthy 2022 to all of you. But what I wanted to bring into the scene today, of course, is Bill Pazdu went and found something from many years ago where I had an opinion on circumcision, apparently. Well, not apparently, obviously. Way back when hangouts were going strong. And I'm going to do in 2022, what I'm going to do is a lot of retro reaction to my work going back years. 2015 and 2016 were kind of my golden years, I guess. And I'll explain why in 2022. So thanks to Bill. Here's my little circumcision rant.
Another thing that was on my mind was baby circumcision. What was first on my mind was thinking about the whole abortion thing. I'm not a woman, so I don't believe that I even have a say.
And I still believe that today.
It's not my body that's pregnant.
It's not my body that's pregnant. I'll say that 1,000,000 times.
I can have an opinion, but I can't have an ultimate say.
Right.
I believe a woman has every right to do what she wants with her body, fetus-wise, any-wise. Doesn't matter. I personally, if I was a woman, I doubt I'll have an abortion, but I'm not. But I have a bit of a conflict where women demand to make the choice of what happens to their bodies, and they should be given it. Yet, people, many women, mothers, give up their male babies for circumcision, for male foreskin removal, for no reason other than woo-woo religion. Why would a mother allow her son to be forcibly circumcised?
Indeed. Why, Bill, would a mother hand her 1-week-old defenseless baby to a ritual genital mutilator? It is beyond my comprehension. Beyond my comprehension. It's even stranger to say this. It's even stranger than this Fourth Crusade that we're listening to. Well, let's carry on listening.
And we're disturbed by
this army had only come together because they'd taken the cross. They all saw themselves as crusaders. I'm just saying that
what they were doing at that time.
At the moment when the Doge starts saying, well, let's not go attack Egypt, let's go capture the city to pay for the crusade, he's diverting those innocent people. You're absolutely right, which is why some of them stood up and said, not with me,
Right.
No, not with me, not with my men. That's perfectly legitimate. I'm just saying that the actual attack on the Doge didn't see the attack on Zara as part of the crusade. He saw it as a way to finance that crusade.
Yes.
Right.
And I think that's a very important distinction to make with more in response to the modern critics of the Fourth Crusade. Would I be correct with that, Dr. Schrader?
Oh, absolutely.
Paul, did you have a comment you were going to add?
No, not really. I have to agree with everything that Dr. Schrader said. The real tragedy of this is that it's the Fourth Crusade. It's a numbered crusade. And, going with Rand's discussion or point that, this is a problem with the scholarship of it, I would argue that this is, one of the major clouding factors of talking about crusades at all. Whenever you discuss the crusade, and there are those people that, take the typical tack of Runciman's scholarship that the Crusades were these religious wars, and look, they went so off the rails that they started attacking their own cities. That's why Crusades are bad. That's part of the problem of the definition and the very terminology that we have to overcome, and that's really part and parcel. We see it really here. As Dr. Schroeder said, the attack on Zara is just a way to finance the crusade, and no one really, really sees this as a crusade. The division is the question of, should we be doing this to finance the crusade, or should we find some other way? And then there's, you have Simon de Montfort, who basically says, no, let's try and do something else. I'm not having anything to do with this. And then you have the other crusade leaders that say, okay, well, if we can do this, then, yes, we can still go on to Egypt. We can still go forward and carry on the crusade. So you have that too. They're not. Neither one is saying, oh yes, this is the crusade. Let's take over these Christian areas. No one is putting that forth. And Dr. Schroeder hit the nail on the head with that.
I think it's worthwhile to point out that, in fact, the nominal head of the Fourth Crusade, Boniface, wasn't even present for the siege of Zara. He was off trying to find some other sources of funding and didn't arrive until December, after the siege had already been concluded.
Yes, he was at Rome at this time. So, Joe, did you have any comments about how you thought the average crusader may have reacted to the idea of attacking Zara? I think we've kind of already addressed that, but...
Well, I think there was a certain degree of hesitation. Certainly, different chroniclers report that. Even seeing Zara itself and just the fact that it was such a well-defended city in a Christian area, in a Latin area, in an area that was clearly for the benefit of Venice and not necessarily for the benefit of the Crusade to take, gave people pause. Like as Rand said, many of them had just been informed that they were on their way to Egypt and hadn't been told that they were going to be stopping off in Zara in the first place. So obviously there was a large contingent that was unhappy with it, led by Simon de Montfort. But well, they got the job done, so it can't have been a majority.
Right. So once the French leaders accepted this proposal from Venice to capture Zara, the Venetians essentially joined the crusade. The Doge takes the cross, as well as many high-ranking Venetians. A fleet of some 200 ships departs Venice in October of 1202, headed for Zara. I thought this was really interesting when I was reading about this fleet. It seemed to be a pretty state-of-the-art fleet that Venice had constructed here. There were ships carrying mangonels and siege equipments. The vessels could be arranged side by side to form floating batteries. There was onboard artillery for throwing stones and Greek fire. And some of the ships were even equipped with storming ladders and flying bridges, and some of them had ramps that could discharge mounted knights directly onto the shore. So
we're getting ahead of ourselves, but it explains how they were successful where everybody else had failed in taking Constantinople. This was a technology.
Right, yeah.
This was a leap of technology for the time.
That's what I was thinking too. I mean, this is such a naval crusade in many ways. I mean, the naval assault on Constantinople. But yeah, we would be kind of getting ahead of ourselves there.
Well, I think just real quick, I think you're seeing some of the lessons learned from the previous crusade actually being put into practice. As we covered in our last podcast series on the Third Crusade ad nauseum, Richard, the maritime element was such a major factor in Richard's campaigns down the Palestinian coast. So it would make a lot of sense that the crusades that come after are always going to remember that is the real key to their military success in the Eastern Mediterranean, is having that naval superiority.
Yeah. So Dr. Schroeder, you were saying this is a leap in technology. This was a new way to conduct an assault. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, Richard obviously didn't have all of those things you were just describing. He was excellent at being able to use his amphibious forces and put his troops ashore, and he used the fleet as a mobile hospital. He used it for bringing his supplies. He used it, to be able to for mobility. But he wasn't able to use ships to lay siege. He didn't take the ships alongside Acre and attack it from the seaward side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is dramatic.
Yeah. So the fleet appears before Zara on November the 10th of 1202. The army lands, but almost immediately they receive a letter from Pope Innocent III forbidding them to attack any Christian city, and Zara is named specifically. So this adds a whole new level